Right, everyone, I'm back, and I wanted to make a video on Hollow Knight because it's very quickly become one of my favourite games of all time because it's just so good. I'm going to be honest, I'm a bit late, about just over 7 years to be exact, but better late than never. And I've only relatively recently started playing this game fully and completed it, and it is just such an incredible game that I wanted to make this video because on the off chance that any of you haven't played it, that you will, because you should, definitely. In case you don't know about Hollow Knight, somehow, it's a 2D Metroidvania style game developed by Team Cherry, with a very big focus on exploration in particular. Since its release, it's garnered quite a loyal and sizable fan base, and has become renowned in the indie gaming scene for a number of reasons, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's done this to such a degree that it's become such a highly recognisable and distinct and memorable game, which is even more impressive a feat when you consider the fact that Team Cherry was, and I think maybe still is, only comprised of 3 people. Anyway, why is this game so distinct? There's a lot of Metroidvania games now. Why is this one in particular so good? Well, let me tell you. As I've mentioned, Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania, so there's a massive focus on exploration to discover new areas and new abilities and whatnot. The game takes place in Hallownest, which is this massive, completely interconnected world, which you can see on the map. And it's completely filled with a whole bunch of different enemies and collectibles and items and secrets everywhere. And because of this, the exploration just feels so rewarding, because chances are, wherever you go, there's going to be something worth your while. Be it like a weapon upgrade, or a charm, or a new ability, like a spell upgrade, or maybe even a movement ability, so you can unlock new areas of the map. Just on that last point, I think that's a really fantastic idea. Having all these areas already there, but you just can't access them yet because you don't have the ability, just makes the world just feel so much more realistic and lived in. It makes it feel like less of a game and more of this place that you're actually exploring, which is incredibly satisfying, if a little tedious at times. And I say that because it can be quite easy to forget which areas require which abilities, so you may waste time running back to them only to find out you can't access them still yet. But overall, it's not a massive problem, and it's still a great idea, so I think they've really nailed that. And the exploration just feels all the better when you're going through all these heavily detailed, really nice looking and unique, for the most part, areas. As for the combat and platforming, the controls are really tight and responsive, so everything you do feels so precise. Combat in particular is really well done because of how simplistic it is. Because really boiled down, you've got just the 4-directional attack, a few spells and a jump, and that's about it. Now, of course, I know there's extra things you can unlock throughout the game, like the nail arts and whatnot, but I think that's the gist of it. Also, the complexity comes from the enemies themselves, because of course they have their own attacks and their attack patterns that you have to memorise, and they're tailored to your abilities, so it helps the combat flow a lot more. Simplicity has really helped them fine-tune the combat, though. I think it's comparable in that regard to Sekiro, because FromSoft did a similar thing there, by only giving you one main weapon, but that allowed them to perfect the combat in that game with that weapon, and I think Team Cherry's done a similar thing here in Hollow Knight. It's challenging, and the game doesn't hold your hand, but it's really rewarding, because in most cases, you know that when you beat a difficult enemy or a boss or something, it's not attributed to equipping a new item or a new weapon or something like it is in some other games, but it's because you yourself have gotten better at the game. You've gotten good enough to do it yourself. I think the combat progression was also done really well, because there's a lot of things that make you more powerful and can also tailor your playstyle, like the charms we'll talk about in a minute as well. But as you play the game, you unlock all these new spells and these spell upgrades. You can upgrade your nail and whatnot, and it makes you feel a lot more capable of taking on all these different enemies. All these enemies that you've potentially been avoiding before because they're too powerful for you, you can now more confidently attack and fight. And another design choice I think they've done really quite good is that for every nail upgrade after the first, I believe, the bosses get more health. And that's a really good balance between being able to more easily deal with the lesser enemies while still keeping the bosses a challenge. It's not like the extra health outweighs the benefits of upgrading your nail. Upgrading your nail still makes these boss fights noticeably easier, but just not too easy that they're boring. Speaking of the bosses, they're really good. They're really enjoyable. A lot of them are very fast-paced and quite demanding. And overall, I think they've done a fantastic job with most of the bosses. There are a few outliers. No, but as a whole, the bosses are really good. Like Nightmare King Grim and the Mantis Lords or Sisters of Battle, and the Pure Vessel. They're just so fun that even now I keep going back to fight them just because they're so enjoyable. And I'm really glad you're able to fight these bosses again and again, however many times you want in Godhome, with potentially even like harder difficulties like on Radiant or Ascended or whatever. Because some of these bosses are so good that you'll just want to keep fighting them again and again. Now onto the lesser enemies, they're also really good, mostly. They're well designed and feel fair to go up against, mostly. In all seriousness though, they are really good, and a lot of them fit the areas they're in incredibly well. Now I won't go through all the examples of this, but I'll go through what I think is the best one, and that's in the City of Tears. The city has these powerful, highly trained guards alongside weaker enemies that don't know how to fight, who before the infection were once just wealthy bugs. I think this juxtaposition is really fitting for a place like the city, because even though the infection has caused them to lose their minds, they still don't know how to fight, because they've never needed to, because they're just wealthy bugs living in a more civilized place than other parts of Hallownest. And then on the other hand, you've got these powerful, highly trained bugs that would have once been employed to protect all these wealthy bugs. It's quite a small detail, really, but I think it's quite fitting, and I think it shows the attention to detail they've done in like where these enemies should go. And there's plenty of examples like this. I just thought that was the best one. Now onto the charms. This is one of the coolest parts about the game for me, because this adds so much personality and individuality to all the players, because they can make their own builds with these charms. I think it's really good, but not perfect. As you can see, there's quite a number of charms, so you can make many different builds to suit whatever playstyle you have. But the main downside is the fact that some charms are just objectively the best. Like take Shaman Stone and Unbreakable Strength, for example. They are objectively like the two best charms in the game. So not equipping them is kind of intentionally handicapping yourself, which does limit the personality and creativity and uniqueness of some of the builds you can make. However, that being said, they're by no means required for every build, and there is definitely value in at least most of the other charms. And it's especially once you've got a bit of experience with a game and you're more confident in your abilities, that's when you can really experiment a lot, because then you're not as reliant on the charms, because you've already got the skill to help you through the game, so you can equip whatever build you want, really. Now on to the sounds and the art. They're extraordinary, honestly. The sound design in particular. Genuinely, the soundtrack is one of the best I've ever heard in gaming. The artwork is really good. It helps distinguish all these different areas. You can clearly tell, just from like a screenshot, for example, which area is which, because they're all so unique and the art style shows that. The characters and the enemies also stand out and are easily differentiated from the background, which is very good. What I find especially interesting is how they've done the artwork to match with the themes of the game. In a lot of the areas, there's a deep blue hue, which really matches the melancholic theme that's prevalent throughout the entire game. This is shown even better in the soundtrack, which I've already mentioned is incredible, but in some examples, like in boss fights, it has a much more energetic and confident feel. Whereas in other areas, like in Green Path, it has a much calmer and intriguing feel, which matches the exploratory gameplay. I think, though, again, the best example of this is in the City of Tears, because this combines everything. The deep blue hue that I mentioned is present, which creates quite a sorrowful feel, and the music only enhances this, as it in of itself has a melancholic yet faintly optimistic feel, as if this crumbling city can once again be as glorious as it once was. In addition, the soft but constant patter of the rain alongside it only stands to further enhance this feeling of desolation. The atmosphere that this creates is so phenomenal that I can't do it justice just explaining it. So I'll show you a quick clip and hopefully you can see what I mean. It's amazing. It's incredibly well utilised and fantastically done. Basically, the art and the sound are bloody good, simply put. Another thing I think they've done really well is the lore and the storytelling and the world building. Most of it is indirect, coming from item descriptions like the relics and in the Hunter's Journal, and coming from NPCs and coming through things you discover while exploring. Not only does this reward exploration, which I mentioned already is quite a big focus, but it also means that all this lore isn't actually necessary to enjoy the game and to just play through it as a casual player. And this is good because, of course, there's a lot of different types of players. There's players who are very interested in the lore and want to know all about it and look through all these item descriptions and whatnot. And there's other players who don't care. They just want to play the game and have fun. And both of these are fine, but some games don't handle it very well. Some games might not pay too much mind to the lore, whereas others may pay too much, so much that a knowledge of it is essentially vital for enjoying the game. And either way, this alienates a group of players. I think Hollow Knight's approach to it is very good, because basically there's only as much lore as you want there to be. If you really don't mind at all, you're not interested, then all you really need to know is that there's an infection and you have to kill this guy, the Hollow Knight, stop it. On the other hand though, if you're far more interested in it, there's a rich and intriguing lore that you can find out about. Now I'm not going to get into the lore, but if you are interested like I am, there's plenty of other videos on it, and it is pretty good, I think. It is quite intriguing. I think a good example of this is at the start of the game, because what you're shown at the very start will mean very little to you as a new player who hasn't played the game before. But you can derive as much meaning from it as you want as you play the game. If you're not very interested in the lore, you can forget about it all, essentially, with no punishment, because it's not necessary. But if you are interested, you can, as you learn more about the world, look back and think back about what you saw at the start of the game, and try and derive new meanings from it. The game opens with a poem. In wilds beyond they speak your name with reverence and regret, for none could tame our savage souls, yet you the challenge met. Under palest watch you taught we change-based instincts were redeemed, a world you gave to bug and beast and they had never dreamed. Now I'm going to be honest with you, I'm no bloody philosopher, I still don't know what this means, but you might as you play the game. But from even the very beginning, you can gather that this Monomon character is pretty important because they've been explicitly quoted. And this is directly followed by a short cutscene showing the Hollow Knight with the infection within him inside his temple of the Black Egg, with all three dreamers on the door. Now again, this will likely mean nothing on your first playthrough at the start, but as you play through the game, you can remember this as you get all this information and link it back to it and remember what you saw at the start of the game. Or you cannot, because it's not necessary for completing the game and having fun, and that's my point. And also, just at the end of the next cutscene, after you arrive, you're quite literally dropped into this new and unfamiliar world, which I think is quite a nice touch. I only wanted to very briefly talk about the NPCs, because there's not a whole lot to most of them. And that's fine. A lot of them, they're just kind of there to add to the world building. They don't really have much to do. And that's fine, because they are all likeable, mostly. And they do add quite a bit to the world to make it feel more lived in. And even that being said, there are definitely a lot that are a lot more important, like all the shopkeepers, for example, and of course a lot of others. The only thing I wish they'd have added more of is NPC quest lines, because there's not really a lot of them, not in the traditional sense at least. And I think it would have added quite a lot to the game. Overall, I really like the NPCs. My favourite is Myla, who's just this little bug who just loves mining and singing while she does it. She's very joyful. And overall, she lives a very happy and... Oh no. I also wanted to talk, again, only very briefly, about the difficulty. It isn't an easy game. It is challenging. But it never really feels unfair most of the time. I think the difficulty has been done very well, and in such a way that's comparable to Dark Souls, in that you always feel rewarded after you've beaten a difficult boss. And I also wouldn't say it's been overdone at all. There's not really a boss that I think is too difficult that it stops being enjoyable. Overall, I think the difficulty's been well done, but just be warned that you will likely have to power through some potentially repeated deaths and setbacks. Lastly, I just wanted to talk about the rewards for doing some things in the game and how that's been done very well. Now, choosing the rewards for these optional activities in games can actually be quite tricky. It can be a delicate balance, especially if the activity is difficult. This is because you need the reward to be worthwhile and worth the trouble of getting it, but you also don't want it to be too good that it alienates players who might not have enough time to do it or just don't care enough about it and just want to finish the game. And this is shown mainly in 4 places, and then being the Golden Zolt statue for defeating Zolt the Mighty 10 times, the Knight's Dung statue for defeating the White Defender 5 times, the little cutscene and entry in the Hunter's Journal for completing the Path of Pain, and the extra menu style for getting, I think it's 57 kills in the Eternal Ordeal. And the last one is, of course, the best, because of the absolutely stellar singing. Just have a listen to this. Absolutely beautiful. Anyway, my point is that I think these are pretty good rewards for both people that have gone through the effort to unlock them and for people that haven't. For people who aren't interested in doing every little thing in the game, they won't see much value in just like statue turning gold or another entry in the Hunter's Journal and whatnot. So they won't feel that they have to do these extra optional things and can instead just have fun how they would normally, just finish the game. And then on the other hand, people who are more completionists, who would have likely done these things anyway, still get an actual physical reward in the game for it. So overall, I think these rewards, while quite small in the game, have been done really quite well. So I think that about covers it. If you couldn't tell already, I'm a massive fan of Hollow Knight. It has very quickly become one of my favourite games ever. It's a masterpiece. Everything from the artwork to the combat to the bosses to even the soundtrack is fantastic. It's phenomenal. And of course, the game isn't perfect, but the good certainly outweighs the bad. It is an incredible game. And it's not too expensive neither. On Steam, it's just shy of 17 quid, including the DLC. And on Xbox, it's even better. being only £12, again, including the DLC. And that's an amazing deal. I think that's well worth every penny. And I'd happily pay quite a bit more to play the game because it's just that good. So, in conclusion, Hollow Knight is an incredible game in so many ways, and I would highly, highly recommend you play it if you haven't already. It's well worth the price. I wanted to do just a small extra little section, separate from the main review, just talking about what it was like to get all achievements in the game. I don't often get all achievements in games, so I wanted to in Hollow Knight because I enjoyed it so much. And getting all the achievements was a lot of fun, especially the speedrun ones, the Steel Soul ones, and the Pantheon 5. The Pantheon 5 achievement was really enjoyable, probably because I like all the bosses so much. And luckily I managed to beat it on my second try, but that was with a lot of absolute radiance practice in the Hall of Gods. Well, that isn't really what I wanted to talk about. There's 3 achievements in particular I wanted to talk about, and they are Speedrun 2, which is complete the game in under 5 hours, the Speed Completion, which is get 100% game completion and finish the game in under 20 hours, and the Steel Heart one, which is get 100% game completion and finish the game in Steel Soul mode. Now, I didn't want to route this myself, so I used guides for each of them. So I wanted to talk a bit about the achievements and how fun it was to complete them, and also about the guides I used. Firstly, there's the Speedrun 2 achievement, and I followed a guide by who else but Fireborn, who is a fantastic Hollow Knight speedrunner, if you didn't know. And as to be expected, the guide was fantastic. It was very comprehensive and very good to follow. And it was a lot of fun, because I enjoyed doing all the little speedrun strategies, and the Hollow Knight himself was actually a lot more fun than the first time I fought him, because the first time I fought him I'd done pretty much everything else in the game, so I had all the upgrades, so I beat him first try without much difficulty. But following this guide, you don't get a lot of these upgrades because you have to beat the game so quickly, of course. So it was actually tricky and a lot more fun. Secondly is the Speed Completion achievement. Now, I won't say you have to go out of your way for this one, probably like I did, because chances are you'll get the Steel Heart achievement in well under 20 hours anyway, which will of course include this achievement once you finish the game. And on top of that, it was the least fun out of the 3, because it was just the most normal of all the runs. But that was no fault of the guide. I followed a guide by a YouTuber called YJ, and again, it was a very good guide, very easy to follow and very comprehensive. So if you don't manage to complete the Steel Heart achievement in under 20 hours, then by all means follow this guide for it. And thirdly, and most enjoyable, was the Steel Heart achievement. Now, I followed a guide by a Reddit user, Smizalek, or something along those lines, and that guide was incredible. It was completely mapped out perfectly, and it was completely chock full of information. I will say I deviated from it slightly at the end, did kind of my own thing, but for the vast majority of the playthrough, I followed it because it's a really good guide. And just a little tip for the Steel Heart run as well. Don't get complacent, alright? Just stay focused throughout the whole thing. I did it on my second try, but I'm ashamed to admit, on my first attempt, I died to massive moss charger. I lost my first Steel Soul attempt to a hedge, alright? So stay focused, don't make the same mistake I did, right? Play carefully throughout the entire game. So overall, if you're thinking of going for all achievements in Hollow Knight, then I'd highly recommend it because it's been a lot of fun. And I'll leave links to all the resources that I've used that I've spoke about in the description in case you want to follow them. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to like and subscribe and check out my other videos. If there's any particular games you want me to review, just let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.